In conversation with Annette Oppenlander. Annette Oppenlander is an award-winning writer, literary coach, and educator. As a best-selling historical novelist, Oppenlander is known for authentic characters and stories based on true events, coming alive in well-researched setting. Having lived in Germany in the first half of her life and the second half in various parts of the US, Oppenlander inspires readers by illuminating story questions as relevant today as they were in the past. Oppenlander's bestselling through World War II story, Surviving the Fatherland, received 8 nominations and award. Uniquely, Oppenlander weaves actual historical figures and events into a plot, giving readers a flavor of true history while enjoying a good story. Oppenlander shares her knowledge through writing workshops at colleges, libraries, festivals, and schools. She also offers vivid presentations and author visits. The mother of fraternal twins and a son, she now lives with her husband and mutt Zelda in Germany. And on today's episode of Author Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to offer the show today, Annette Oppenlander. How are you doing, Annette?
I am doing great, Peter. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm quite excited. We're going to be having a conversation around your amazing literature works. That was quite impressive with me, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Arnett, I want to first say I am impressed by your large bodies of works, and I would like us to start today's conversation with one of your best-selling titles in the name of 47 Days, the true story of two teen boys defined eaters, rich biographical World War II stories for teens, which I found the description page of it on Amazon to be quite pulling, compelling, and captivating. And knowing that this is a true story, I am curious to ask you as to how it came about. What inspired you particularly to write 47 Days? And how did the title come to be too?
Well, it's a story about my father as a 16-year-old boy.
Oh.
And I started it is actually part of the larger works of Surviving the Fatherland.
Mm.
But after I had written the novel, the big piece, I decided I wanted to pull this 47 days out because this is specifically for teens, teen boys. And
Mm.
this story is about two kids, basically teenagers, who are drafted at the very end of World War II, and
Oh.
they decide not to go. They decide to hide. And even though it was extremely dangerous. So my father and his friend then hid in the woods, and they never knew how long the war would still last. And
Mm.
as we know now, it was only another 2 months, but at that time that was unclear. So it was very dangerous. And I want people today to kind of think for themselves and say, what would I have done? What would I've how would I have gone when
Mm.
they drafted me, or would I have said, no, I'm going to think for myself and I'll, do what I think is the right way.
Mm.
And so I think this booklet, this very small book, has been extremely successful for years.
Well.
It's in this little category, European biographical fiction.
Mm.
It's read by a lot of schools, a lot
Well.
of, yeah, in schools read it.
That's
So
actually amazing. It's quite amazing because while I checked through the feedbacks of readers that have read it, I was like, wow, this is quite impressive. This is very impressive. And to know that the bestseller too, it's quite, worth celebration. And, you've done a great job, I'd say. Yeah, beautiful. Well
thank
done.
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you have a copy there. Would you like to show to the camera
Oh
just so we see
yes,
what it
yes.
looks like?
So this is the
Beautiful.
American copy.
Oh. Interesting.
Um,
Thank you.
I can also say that I write in two languages. I write in German as well.
Mm.
Um, Native Americans or Native British speakers will know that or hear that I have an accent, a German accent,
Ah,
which even though I spent 30 years in the US, I never got rid
oh.
of. So, but anyway, most of my books are in both languages.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I love that. Thank you for sharing. That's quite
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. And also, I love your Lily and Gunther story in one of your impressive titles, Surviving the Fatherland, a true coming of age love story set in World War II, Germany, moving love stories of World War II, Germany. Without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what I'd expect in terms of themes picking up surviving the fatherland?
Yes, well, themes, it's really about children who grow up during World War II in Germany.
Mm.
And so it is about their story going through from childhood through teenage years to young adulthood. And large themes are guilt, forgiveness. And then
Mm.
in the larger sense, it's the love story of my parents.
Oh, wow.
And I'm writing it from both their perspectives in
Mm.
first person,
Oh.
starting when they were very young, at 7 and 11 years old. And so, in a way, the theme is also to look at war children, not just then, but again today. Who
Mm.
suffers the most when there's war? It's always the
The
children.
children.
And
Mm.
yes, and they have no say. And
Absolutely.
back in the day, I felt strongly that it was important to show that side of German civilians.
Honestly, it's a very sad reality that children are the ones that suffer the most in war. And these are the people that are quite innocent or who don't even have an idea of what, spotted or what caused the war at the first time. It's
Yes,
quite a very sad one, really. It's a very sad one.
yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And I am still impressed by the making of Surviving the Fatherland. And I would like to ask you why you wrote the book and also why does it take you 15 years to complete this book? I mean, this a period of time that if you have a child, it will have grown into a teenager by 15 years. So why does it take you a bunch of 15 years to complete Surviving the Fatherland?
Yes, well, it started out in 2002.
Ah.
I interviewed my parents when I came to Germany to visit. I lived in the US at the time. And so I thought I'll interview my parents about their memories and I will keep this for my children to share. They didn't know each other
Interesting.
well. And
Oh.
then I started writing their stories down. I interviewed them together and also separately. And then I wrote those things down. I started some short stories. And then in 2009, I took a class at Indiana University in writing. And my instructor at the time said, you should really make this into a novel, a biographical
Mm.
novel. There's so much good information here. And so I did. I started and I thought, oh, great, I've got a novel. Well, I was not nearly ready to write for a
Mm.
public audience. I
Yeah,
needed time and I needed training.
the skill
And
set.
so I rewrote that story over and over. I mean, I sort of knew and I did things in different perspectives, first person, third person.
Mm.
And it I put it away again. I got tired of it. I started writing other things, but it always pulled me and it would never leave me alone. So I had to pull it back out.
Mm.
And then 2017 came around. My father at the time was 89. And I
Mm.
was thinking, if I don't do this soon, he'll be gone. My mother had
Mm.
passed, unfortunately, very early,
Oh.
2004. So she didn't even know I was writing.
Oh.
So, anyhow, I finally finished the English version. And in 2019, I translated and then published here in Germany. And my father finally got to read his book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was at that point 91. And I remember giving
Oh.
it to him. And I dropped it off, and then I came back the next day or the day after, and I said, how is it going? He said, you have to leave. I don't have time. I've got to read. So he was reading this book, and he was done in 4 days. And this
Oh.
is the book, and it is about 400 pages. So it's not a small book to read, but he just flew right through it. And then when I visited him after, I said, how was it? And he cried. It was really hard for him because he found things in there he didn't know about my mother. So there were just some very
Oh my
interesting
goodness. I really wish,
things.
sorry to cut you short. I really wish your mother was alive to read it.
Yes,
It would
yes.
she would have caught some other things, since you interviewed them separately. And I was even about to ask you, how does it feel for you to interview your parents? I mean, you interviewed them together and you conducted another one separately. And I think that would be true recording, right?
I recorded everything,
Mm,
and it was pretty eye-opening, actually, because my father, the father of my mother, my grandfather, was a Nazi, and there were some things that came out that I
mm,
had no idea about. Some
wow.
really not very nice things, but I wanted to be so. In the book, it's very honest, because I want this to be out there.
Wow.
That they told me.
Mm. It's quite impressive and a bit quite emotional.
Yes, yes, it is an emotional book.
Oh my goodness, I
Um,
can imagine. I can imagine. That's very emotional. It sounds quite compelling. I'm really taken aback listening to you talk about this. It's quite impressive. And I think it's actually one of the good things that we should do. It's up to preserve family history. It's up to preserve history of those who have gone, before us and, preserve it the upcoming generation so they can
yes,
learn and see and read and have an idea of the life of their great great grandfathers and what happens back then. That's quite emotional, really. Thank you for sharing. And I can see the book is quite amazing because the number of feedbacks on it is quite impressive too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I still receive emails today from readers, and
Mm,
they say, "Well, thank you so much for sharing this because my parents never talked about it." And
wow.
in many families, there was no discussion about what had happened during the war. The
Mm,
roles were of the parents, and so yeah, I still hear about those.
yeah. Thank you. I love the sound of it. Thank you. And also, there's another of your titles that stuck with me, and it's the one titled Everything We Lose, a Civil War novel of hope, courage, and redemption. And while I find that to be quite interesting, beautiful cover, really. While I find that to be quite interesting, I would like you to tell us a bit about it and also why you derived love, or would I say passion, in writing war-themed novels. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, sure. Well, it's really a story about two friends during the American Civil War, which
Mm,
I always found fascinating because it was the last war that took place on American soil, and it really ripped the country in two. And at the time, so basically, these two friends, one is just a young farm boy, and the other
mm,
one is a slave at the neighboring plantation.
yeah,
And so those two boys get ripped apart. There are a lot of things happening. The farm boy goes into the war to hide because he thinks he killed somebody. And the slave, the young man, he gets taken away. And so there's a lot of adventure involved in that story. And why do I write a lot of war themed novels? it's I I think there's always war somewhere in the world, even
Mm,
now, and we tend to kind of zoom it out, right? We blend it out. We kind of, after the first initial news, we sort of say, well, okay, it's over there. We don't really, we're not affected, but we are. And so what I do is I take readers into this world of this particular war from a perspective of normal people, not the generals and not the big guys or the rich
mm,
guys, but regular people. And I want people to kind of feel what it maybe was like. Obviously, I'm also inventing, but I do a lot of research. But I want them to kind of feel a little bit. This is what it was like. And
mm.
even though we can't really be there and feel it, but I want that memory
Absolutely.
to remain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite amazing, really. I love your take on this. And following on from your answer to that, I would like to ask you, you've written several war team novel. I'd love to ask, would you like to think of yourself as an historian? Am I right to call you an historian? I don't know if you'd like to, give an answer to that. It just popped up in my head and I feel I should ask you.
Well, I think historian is a pretty high title to achieve, because a historian takes every tiny bit of history and researches that. And there are some authors like Eckert, I forget his first name, but
Mm,
he wrote every story basically down to the T, based on
that's true.
everything that happened, every
Mm,
person, the
was
and what I
involved.
do is I sort of interpret.
Mm,
I do a lot of research, so I create this world, this historical world in my mind,
mm,
and then put it, of course, on paper so my readers can follow.
yeah.
But I also retain some freedom. So while I stay with all the historical data and events and things like that,
Mm,
I do want a little more freedom than a historian would have, because that's,
mm,
in a sense, nonfiction.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do fictionalize. I even fictionalized my parents' story. It's biographical fiction, but it's
Oh.
still, there's a percentage of freedom. I wasn't there, obviously, when they met.
Mm,
I have to invent. I wasn't there when they spoke to their parents as
mm,
children, so
yeah.
obviously I have to invent. So at that point, I just call it historical
Interesting.
biography. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love your take on that. Thank you for answering. I just
yeah,
felt a bit tempted to ask you.
yeah. It's a good question.
And I do appreciate your response, really. It's quite beautiful. Thank you. Now, apart from surviving the fatherland and 47 days, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
I am currently working on an immigration story from the 19th century, something entirely different, not a war story for once.
Yeah.
It's about a German immigrant, a German young woman migrating to America. Back then, it wasn't the U.S., so about
Mm.
1848, and an Irish young man emigrating from Ireland because of the potato famine.
Oh,
And so they meet, and this story is about them. And I have the manuscript finished for book one, but
wow.
it's not out yet. So,
Oh, interesting. That's great. It sounds like you've got quite a lot ongoing, really. And I hope you find some time to sleep.
yeah, yeah, that would be good. I do. I have the best of all worlds. I can put it away and take a nap.
Yeah, yeah, writing is quite amazing. It's quite lovely. Yeah, it's quite an amazing one. And that's one of the reasons why I think that writers need to be praised more for their writing. We need more accolades, more recognition, more praise, because it's a work of art. It's not an easy task to write. And as such,
Yes.
when we have writers who has published several novels, it's world celebration, really. It's quite commendable. And that's one of the reasons I so much love to appreciate people for their literature
Hmm.
works. You've got quite a lot ongoing, quite commendable. Well done again, I'd say.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
Yeah,
it's great you're doing this, so I appreciate it.
you're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah. And also, I love to also talk about feedbacks and criticism. You've written on a war team, you've written historical fiction and several other titles. And to me, you may want to agree that these titles actually, or this team, are the ones that might spark a bit of controversy and a bit of, miscommunication between people. And as much, I would love to ask you, I'm curious to know if you've ever experienced any challenges in terms of negative criticism of your books in the past. If you've ever had one, how do you react to it? And also, how would you describe your writing style? I think I've got two questions in there already.
Yes. Well, I believe every author receives some negative feedback,
Yeah.
some negative reviews. I think no matter who writes, whether it's the most famous author, there are
Yes.
always some who do not like, because we all have
Monster.
different opinions, right? And I have to say, I of course don't like seeing it, but I kind of shrug it off. And especially
Mm,
now, because I've written so many, I've got so many reviews.
yeah,
And so overall, I know I reach a lot of people, and I cannot reach everybody, and that's
absolutely.
fine.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best training I got for this viewpoint is when I was in writing groups back in the day when I was learning to write.
Mm,
I, we critiqued each other's work every
mm,
2 weeks, and some of the critique wasn't so nice. And some people would come to the group and they would stay for a month and then they would be gone because they couldn't take the critique.
imagine.
But
Hmm.
you learn so much by making yourself listen to what is being said.
Mm,
And over time, that was a real good training. And I can actually recommend that to anybody. The writing groups are wonderful for that. So it's sort of a training of getting a little thicker skin and
yeah,
listening to what's being said.
absolutely. That's
And
great.
then, yeah, you had a second part to the question. Let's
Yeah,
see.
that's how would you describe your writing style?
Yes, my writing style. Well, you mentioned earlier that it's pretty emotional, and I have to say I do write in a style that is pretty emotional in
Mm,
general. I take readers onto very close to me or close to the characters
mm,
so that they write to me and that they cried or whatever. They have emotions when they're reading. And so I think that's kind of a unique thing that I learned. And I want to give credit to a literary agent who is also an amazing author and teacher. His name is Don Mass. He,
mm,
I went to 2 1 week classes with him, and he's written several really good books on and on writing fiction, and
mm.
it's about the emotional art of writing fiction.
Oh.
And it's really I don't have the titles right now, but if you were to look that up, I think it teaches a lot on how to create something in the reader,
Mm,
even if it's anger or frustration. But as soon as that reader feels something,
mm,
then I feel you have, as an author, reached him or her.
absolutely.
And I find that sometimes sad. I read a book and after the book, I'm like, I don't really care about this character.
Mm,
There's nothing here that moves me, and whether good
mm.
or bad. And so that's probably, yeah, kind of my style.
Yeah, I enjoy hearing that from you. That's quite amazing and also quite educational as well. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And also, I'd
Sure.
love to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book, what would you advise people in this category?
Advice, I would say, learn. So, which means studying, obviously writing books, reading a lot in various genres, participating in writing groups, going to conferences, doing all the things that
Absolutely.
And I don't really mean you have to get a degree in writing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah.
But it is necessary to expose yourself to a great deal and do a lot of practice. And then another piece of advice I would have is it's not easy to know what your motivation is. You know, why are you writing? What is it that you want to accomplish? Do you want to be a professional writer, become famous, or do you write for your grandmother? So what is it that you're looking for? And depending on the goal you have, if you have, let's say, a goal of wanting to become famous, well, that's a difficult thing to achieve. And I am in a lot of groups, writing groups, and people say, well, my book isn't selling, and what am I doing wrong? And so then my first thing would be to say, write another book and another. Don't just sit on one and expect that to go big.
Absolutely.
Because 40 million books on Amazon.
A lot.
How will you be found, right? So it's also, I guess, in the end, what matters is whether you really enjoy the process of writing. And when I started writing and I wrote that Fatherland book for so many years, I didn't do it because I wanted to get money out at the bottom line. That wasn't my motivation. That came later. It did come, but now I have, I don't know, 15 novels in English and a bunch of novellas and some German, about the same amount in German. So it comes, but had I stopped after the first one, it wouldn't have. So yeah.
That's amazing. That's a lovely advice. Thank you for sharing. And I'm hoping that viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. And just in case we have some viewers who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
Well, pretty much anywhere books are sold, any bookstore or online stores. So ebooks, paperbacks, some are also available as audiobooks.
Audiobooks, interesting. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Annette Oppenlander's books directly on Amazon and also on other platforms. So thank you so much, Annette, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's great.
Absolutely. It's my joy as well. Such an honor to speak with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.